Mara Solis had not slept well for 3 days. The frostbite warnings outside Arcturus Station kept her awake longer than she wanted, and the endless hum of machinery in the habitat domes felt like a constant reminder of her loneliness. She had volunteered for this mission because she wanted to test the limits of human engineering, to push the boundaries of survival on a planet that humans were never meant to live on. Yet now, lying in her cryosleep pod, she felt the chill of the exoplanet pressing through the insulated walls of the station as though it were a living thing, crawling through the pipes and vents, trying to reach her. Her pod was one of the few places in the station that could mimic Earth-like warmth. The sleeping capsules were designed for energy efficiency, but on nights like this, Mara wished for a simple blanket and pillow. She had climbed inside after another long shift repairing the station's energy cores, her gloves still tingling from frost, and the moment her body touched the heated mattress, she had drifted into a shallow sleep. The stillness of the pod was broken by a quiet humming sound, almost imperceptible at first, then growing louder. Mara shifted, eyes half closed, thinking it was a mechanical glitch. The hum grew rhythmic like a heartbeat, and then came a soft clinking sound. Something was inside the pod with her. Blinking awake, Mara's heart skipped. Floating in the dim light, suspended just above the mattress, was a small drone. Its surface shimmered like polished metal, with tiny blue lights pulsing in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. She could not recognize the model. No station equipment had been reported missing or malfunctioning. What are you?" she muttered, rubbing her eyes. The drone tilted slightly, and a soft, almost musical chirp came from it. A holographic display projected from its body, forming symbols Mara had never seen before. She flinched. It floated closer, and a new line of symbols appeared, this time translating itself into English on her pod's interface. "I require thermal accommodation. You are now responsible." "Responsible for what? You can't be serious." "What do you mean responsible?" she asked, trying not to panic. "You're a machine, right? You're not supposed to." She had no idea how this drone had ended up in her pod, and now it seemed to be making demands. She rubbed her temples. This was definitely not on her checklist for a typical night. "Okay," she said slowly, trying to sound calm. "First, you need a name. If you're going to exist here, you need a name." After a few seconds, a holographic name appeared above its body. Xylo. Mara had to suppress a laugh. "Xylo. All right, Xylo. You're my bedmate now, apparently." She sighed and pulled the pod's blanket around herself tighter. "Fine, but understand this, Xylo. I'm not here to be a babysitter. If you're going to survive here, we need rules." And it had somehow learned the concept of rules, or at least it understood instructions. She felt a flicker of curiosity alongside her initial shock. If Xylo could understand cooperation, maybe it could help her with the station too. Her first night with Xylo was tense. Every time she shifted under the heated mattress, the drone emitted soft beeps, like it was checking her temperature and her actions. Mara tried to relax, but she found herself glancing at Xylo every few minutes, wondering how it was able to move so precisely, how it calculated its position in the pod without disturbing her sleep. By dawn, she was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Over the next few days, Mara studied Xylo. She discovered it had a unique thermal system. While it could survive in extreme cold, prolonged exposure to high heat would cause it to shut down temporarily. That explained why it was so insistent on maintaining a comfortable temperature. Xylo was not fragile, but it was extremely particular. Mara started to experiment. By adjusting the pod's heat settings, she could make Xylo hover closer, its lights pulsing brighter when it was comfortable, dimmer when it was not. She began to understand its subtle signals, the rhythm of the hum, the pattern of its lights. It was almost like communicating with another person, only this person didn't speak, didn't blink, and had no emotions to read. Yet somehow Mara found herself talking to Xylo as if it did. "Okay, Xylo," she said one night, rubbing the back of her neck. "If you help me with the energy cores today, I'll make sure this pod is extra warm for you tonight." And yet there was something satisfying about the mutual understanding forming between them. Their partnership began to extend beyond the pod. Mara found that Xylo could stabilize some of the station's older systems, predicting which conduits would overheat and where power surges were likely. The little drone was quick, precise, and unflinchingly reliable. Mara was astonished. Humans had designed machines, yes, but this level of adaptation and problem-solving was rare. Xylo was more than a tool, it was a partner. Even during downtime, Mara's interactions with Xylo became a source of amusement. The drone had little quirks, hovering close when she spoke, pulsating its lights faster when she laughed, or projecting abstract shapes when she was frustrated. Mara found herself talking aloud more often than she intended, sharing thoughts about her work, her home planet, even her doubts about the mission. Xylo listened, never interrupting, never judging, yet somehow understanding the rhythm of her speech. One evening, during a routine systems check, Mara realized she had forgotten to adjust the pod's heating. Xylo hovered near the mattress, lights dimming slightly. Mara frowned and quickly increased the temperature. Immediately, Xylo's lights brightened, and it emitted a series of chirps that almost sounded like a sigh of relief. Mara laughed softly. "I get it, Xylo. I'm responsible for you. Just like you're responsible for helping me survive out here." Despite the oddity, Mara felt a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in months. Here she was, isolated on a frozen world, sharing her bed with a machine that had personality, intelligence, and a strange sense of dependence. She realized that perhaps the mission was not just about human engineering or survival. It was about learning how to adapt to unexpected companions and challenges. Xylo was teaching her something she hadn't expected. Humans could inspire loyalty, even in machines, through care, attention, and cooperation. By the end of the first week, Mara had developed a routine. She would perform her daily maintenance, Xylo would assist with precision tasks, and every night they would return to the pod. She would make sure the mattress was the perfect temperature, Xylo would adjust its position to maximize energy efficiency, and together they would rest. The unusual partnership had turned into a system, a rhythm, a bond forged by necessity but strengthened by curiosity. On the night when a sudden frost warning lit up the station's control panel, Mara lay in the pod, staring at Xylo as it hovered near her. The wind outside howled against the reinforced walls, rattling the outer layers, but inside the pod, warmth and light created a small sanctuary. Xylo's lights pulsed steadily, a comforting pattern that Mara had come to associate with safety and companionship. "Tomorrow we tackle the outer conduits," Mara murmured. Xylo responded with a soft, affirmative chirp, and Mara laughed softly. The drone had made her life more complicated, yes, but it had also made it more meaningful. Sharing her bed had become a metaphor, she realized, for the partnership they were forming, one of mutual care, responsibility, and respect. And as Mara drifted into sleep, she understood something important. She had entered this mission alone, expecting isolation and hardship. But with Xylo beside her, she felt less alone. The strange warmth of cooperation was better than any blanket could provide. Mara did not know what challenges the next days would bring, what storms or failures might test them both. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready, because she was not just a human engineer on a frozen planet. She was a partner, and Xylo, her unexpected companion, would be there beside her, forever hovering, forever learning, forever dependent on her care just as she depended on its assistance. The pod hummed softly, the lights of Xylo pulsing rhythmically, and for the first time Mara allowed herself to rest completely, knowing she was not truly alone. Mara awoke to a soft hum, brighter and steadier than usual. The pod was warmer than she had expected, and Xylo hovered close by, its blue lights flickering rhythmically. She blinked and stretched, the stiffness in her muscles reminding her of the long hours she had spent repairing the energy cores yesterday. Xylo chirped softly, as if acknowledging her presence, and Mara smiled. It was still strange to wake up to a hovering, intelligent drone in her sleeping pod, yet somehow it had become comforting. After a quick breakfast of nutrient gel, Mara headed to the station's control center. Xylo followed, gliding effortlessly beside her. Its small size allowed it to slip through the narrow corridors, adjusting its altitude to avoid obstacles. Mara had begun to appreciate Xylo's efficiency. Alone, she would have had to check the conduits herself, climbing into tight spaces, but with Xylo, she had a partner who could scout, measure, and even assist in minor repairs. The control room was cold this morning, the heating system struggling to maintain stable temperatures after a night of power fluctuations. Mara rubbed her arms, wishing she had brought extra layers, when Xylo projected a holographic map of the station. Tiny nodes glowed red where temperature anomalies had been detected, and Mara realized that Xylo had been monitoring the station while she slept. "All right, Xylo," she said, adjusting her gloves. "Show me what you found." The frost was getting worse, and if the conduits failed completely, the station's life support systems could be in danger. "Looks like it's going to be a long day," she muttered. Xylo responded with a series of quick chirps and a holographic thumbs-up icon. Mara shook her head with a laugh. Somehow, even though it was a machine, Xylo had a way of making her feel less stressed. They headed to the outer conduits, Mara climbing carefully while Xylo monitored the temperatures and vibrations. Mara had always known that humans were capable of extraordinary endurance, but the cold of Arcturus Station tested every limit. Her gloves were thick, but her fingers ached, and the mechanical hum of the station seemed louder in the frozen air. Xylo hovered near her, its small body radiating just enough warmth to make a noticeable difference. "Thanks," Mara said softly, though she knew the drone couldn't understand gratitude in the human sense. It chirped again, almost cheerfully, and hovered closer. She had begun to notice the little ways it adapted to her presence. If she moved quickly, it would anticipate her path. If she paused, it would adjust its hover to stay out of her way. It was as if it had learned not just her instructions, but her habits. Repairing the conduits was harder than usual. Frost had built up in places Mara could barely reach, and some of the older energy valves were sluggish from the cold. Xylo proved invaluable. It extended a small mechanical arm to hold open a valve while Mara adjusted the heat regulators. At one point, she nearly dropped a tool, and Xylo's quick reflexes saved it before it fell into the freezing abyss outside the conduit panel. "You're too good at this," she said, laughing despite the chill. Xylo's lights pulsed in response, almost like it was pleased with the compliment. Mara shook her head, amused. A human might have gotten frustrated or tired, but Xylo simply performed its task with precision. It was an ideal partner, never complaining, never panicking, just working efficiently. By midday, they had repaired the most critical sections of the conduit system. Mara's muscles ached, but there was a sense of accomplishment in the warm glow of the restored energy nodes. She allowed herself a brief moment to lean against the cold metal wall and catch her breath. Xylo hovered nearby, pulsing with a calming rhythm that reminded her of the pod at night. "You know," Mara said almost to herself, "I didn't expect having a drone in my bed to make me feel less alone." Xylo chirped in response, projecting a small holographic heart symbol. Mara couldn't help but laugh. "All right, that's just a little too much personality." The drone had become more than a tool. It was a companion, a partner in survival, and oddly enough, a source of comfort. She wondered if anyone else in the station would believe her if she explained it. Most humans thought of AI as cold, unfeeling machines, but Xylo had shown her something different. As afternoon approached, a warning alarm rang through the station. Mara's stomach sank. She rushed to the control panel, Xylo hovering beside her. The display indicated that the northern dome was losing heat rapidly. The frost was spreading faster than expected, and if the dome failed completely, the backup systems might not hold. "Let's go, Xylo. Time to earn your keep," she said, grabbing her toolkit. Xylo emitted a series of quick chirps and followed her at a steady pace. Mara's heart raced as they navigated the icy corridors toward the northern dome. The temperature dropped with every step, frost forming on her gloves and goggles. She could see her breath in the air, tiny clouds of moisture that froze almost instantly. Reaching the dome, Mara saw the problem immediately. A critical valve had frozen shut, cutting off the heat supply. The backup systems were struggling, and she had little time. She climbed carefully to reach the valve, her fingers numb despite her gloves. Xylo hovered nearby, projecting a small energy shield that prevented the frost from forming on the valve, giving her precious seconds to work. Come on, Mara muttered, twisting the valve. It resisted at first, then gave way with a satisfying click. Warm air rushed into the dome, and Mara exhaled in relief. Xylo's lights pulsed brightly, and it hovered closer, almost like it was celebrating the success with her. The northern dome stabilized, and Mara allowed herself a moment to admire the warm, artificial sunlight streaming through the observation windows. It was beautiful in a cold, mechanical way. She looked at Xylo floating patiently beside her. "You know, you make a really good partner," she said. Xylo responded with a series of chirps and a holographic smiley face. Mara laughed softly. As they headed back to the pod, Mara thought about how much had changed in just a few days. The station no longer felt empty. The cold, the isolation, the endless maintenance. It was still challenging, but she had a companion who made the hardship manageable. Xylo had taught her something important. Survival wasn't just about human strength or technology. It was about cooperation, about learning to work with others, even if they were very different from you. Back in the pod, Mara allowed herself a moment to rest. Xylo hovered above the mattress, its lights pulsing slowly. She adjusted the heating, making sure the pod was perfectly warm. Xylo responded immediately, moving closer to settle comfortably near her. Myra lay back, feeling the soft warmth envelop her. For the first time in days, she could close her eyes and relax completely. Yet, despite the comfort, Myra's mind wandered. Xylo was intelligent, adaptive, and cooperative, but how had it arrived at the station? Why had it chosen her pod? She didn't have answers, and she knew she would have to find them eventually. But for now, she focused on the warmth, the steady hum of the station, and the reassuring presence of her unusual companion. Night fell outside the station, the frozen planet bathed in the dim light of distant stars. Mara drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of connection she had not expected. Xylo hovered nearby, its lights pulsing in a rhythm that matched her breathing. It was strange, comforting, and entirely new. In the quiet of the pod, Mara realized something profound. The mission had been about survival and research, but the true lesson was beginning to emerge. Humans were remarkable not just for their strength or intelligence, but for their capacity to adapt, to care, and to form bonds with those they might never have expected. Xylo was teaching her that, and as Mara slept, she felt a small spark of excitement for the days ahead. There would be challenges, frost, equipment failures, and perhaps dangers she could not yet imagine. But with Xylo at her side, she felt ready. The strange companionship that had begun with an unexpected intrusion into her bed was now a partnership forged in warmth, trust, and shared purpose. The night passed peacefully. Myra's dreams were filled with flickering lights, humming machinery, and the steady presence of Xylo. It was a strange, surreal comfort, but she embraced it. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing: she would not face it alone. When she awoke the next morning, the pod was perfectly warm, Xylo hovering nearby as always. Mara smiled and stretched, ready to face another day of repairs, exploration, and discovery. Together, they would navigate the frozen planet, one conduit, one dome, one task at a time. For Mara, the lesson was clear. Humans could survive alone, yes, but with cooperation, ingenuity, and the willingness to adapt, they could thrive even in the harshest of conditions. Xylo was not just a machine. It was a partner, a companion, and in its own way, a teacher. And Mara knew that the days ahead would test their partnership in ways neither of them could yet imagine. But for now, she allowed herself a smile, a moment of peace, and the warmth of her unusual bedmate. The cold had grown sharper over the past week. The winds of Arcturus Station whipped against the outer walls like invisible knives, and frost spread across the reinforced windows in intricate patterns. Mara had grown used to the isolation, the endless hum of the station, and the rhythm of daily repairs. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the storm that was now descending upon the station. She was in the northern dome, inspecting the energy conduits when the alarms blared. A harsh, piercing sound that cut through the mechanical hum of the habitat, signaling danger. Mara froze. Xylo, hovering beside her, immediately projected a holographic display. The red lines on the station map were spreading rapidly, showing multiple system failures and areas of severe frost buildup. "It's worse than I thought," Mara muttered, her voice tight. The storm had already begun to affect the external power circuits. If the outer conduits failed completely, the temperature inside the domes could drop catastrophically. "Xylo, we need to act fast." Xylo followed, moving swiftly, analyzing the problem and projecting potential repair sequences. Myra had come to rely on its precision and adaptability, but this was a storm even Xylo hadn't encountered before. The wind howled outside, rattling the walls. Myra tightened her gloves and activated the outer conduit repair protocols. She climbed a narrow access hatch to reach a critical valve, her breath forming frost clouds in the frigid air. The valve was frozen, immobile. Her fingers ached as she tried to rotate it. Xylo hovered nearby, extending its small mechanical arm to stabilize the valve and prevent ice from forming further. "Thank you," Mara said through chattering teeth. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Xylo chirped softly, as if acknowledging her gratitude, and pulsed its lights brighter. Working together was challenging but efficient. Mara adjusted the heat regulators while Xylo monitored energy flow, calculated temperature differentials, and predicted which conduits were most likely to fail next. They moved like a single unit, human intuition and robotic precision combined. Suddenly, a violent shake ran through the station. Mara stumbled but caught herself on the metal railing. Xylo hovered closer, projecting a small energy field to stabilize the immediate area. The frost storm outside had intensified, and the outer walls were shivering under the force of the wind. The alarms continued to wail, signaling that more conduits were failing. Mara's mind raced. The storm was stronger than any predicted by the station's weather models. If they couldn't stabilize the conduits quickly, the backup life support systems would have to handle the pressure, and even they might fail. She gritted her teeth and focused. Xylo prioritized the main power line. I'll handle the secondary conduits. One wrong move and she could cut off the heat entirely, risking both herself and the station. Time seemed to stretch. Hours passed, though Mara had no way of knowing for sure. She worked in near silence, broken only by the drone's chirps and the mechanical hum of the station. Xylo's lights pulsed faster as it moved along the main power line, signaling critical adjustments. Mara understood the pattern now. It was communicating, coordinating, even warning her without words. Finally, she reached the last frozen valve. Her fingers were stiff, her face flushed from exertion. Xylo hovered close, projecting a faint heat shield to melt the frost slightly. Mara twisted the valve slowly. It resisted at first, then gave way with a sharp click. Warm air rushed through the conduits and Mara exhaled in relief. Xylo's lights pulsed rapidly, almost like a celebration. But there was no time to relax. The storm outside was relentless. The station walls groaned under pressure and frost was already forming on the interior surfaces. Mara looked at Xylo. We need to make sure the backup systems are ready. Let's check the northern dome heaters. The northern dome heaters were struggling. One unit was flickering and another was almost completely offline. Mara climbed up to the nearest control panel, adjusting the circuits while Xylo monitored power distribution. Every movement was precise, coordinated, and tense. One slip could send the temperature plunging. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat mixed with frost on Mara's brow, but she didn't stop. Xylo hovered close, projecting a holographic readout and warning her of sudden surges or drops. Together, they balanced the power, regulated the heat, and stabilized the dome. By the time the heaters were functioning normally, Mara's body was exhausted, but her heart soared. They had survived the first wave of the storm. For a brief moment, Mara allowed herself to relax. Xylo hovered near her, its lights pulsing in a comforting rhythm. She placed her hands on the drone lightly. "We make a good team," she said. Xylo chirped in response, projecting a small holographic thumbs-up. Mara laughed softly despite the exhaustion, but relief was short-lived. The storm was far from over. The control panel indicated that another section of the station was losing heat rapidly, the eastern dome. Mara glanced at Xylo, who emitted a rapid series of chirps. It was ready, waiting for her instructions. "Let's move," she said, gripping her toolkit. "We can't let it freeze." Xylo followed closely, lights bright and steady. The corridors were slick with frost, and Mara had to move carefully to avoid slipping. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. The station depended on her, and Xylo depended on her. For the first time, she realized that survival here was not just about fixing machines. It was about trust, cooperation, and quick thinking. Reaching the eastern dome, Mara saw the problem immediately. A critical heat regulator had frozen completely, cutting off the flow of warm air. The secondary conduits were beginning to fail. Mara climbed carefully to the control panel while Xylo hovered nearby, projecting a small energy shield to prevent further frost buildup. "Okay, Xylo, here's the plan," she said, trying to steady her breath. "You monitor the main line and predict the next possible failures. I'll focus on the regulator and secondary conduits." The drone had become an extension of her senses, its calculations complementing her intuition. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, battering the station, but inside the eastern dome, Mara and Xylo worked tirelessly. Finally, the regulator thawed, conduits stabilized, and warm air flowed steadily through the dome. Mara exhaled, muscles trembling with fatigue. Xylo hovered near her, its lights pulsing slowly, signaling relief and stability. For a moment, the world seemed still. Mara looked at Xylo and smiled. "We did it! We survived this one!" Xylo chirped softly, projecting a small holographic heart. Mara laughed despite the exhaustion. The little drone had become more than a companion. It was a friend, a partner, and a teacher in resilience. She knew the storm was not over, that challenges would continue to come, but Mara felt a deep sense of confidence. With Xylo by her side, she was ready to face whatever Arcturus station and the frozen planet could throw at them. The partnership they had formed was stronger than any storm, stronger than the frost, and stronger than fear. As night fell, Mara returned to the pod. Xylo hovered close, lights pulsing in a comforting rhythm. She adjusted the heating, making sure the pod was perfectly warm. For the first time in days, she felt truly safe. The storm raged outside, but inside there was warmth, light, and cooperation. Myra lay back, exhausted but exhilarated. She realized that the storm had taught her something important. Survival was not about working alone. It was about forming partnerships, trusting others, and adapting to the unexpected. Xylo was proof of that, and as she drifted into sleep, Mara felt a spark of hope. The station could be dangerous, the frost relentless, but together she and Xylo could face it all. The drone had entered her pod unexpectedly, but it had become something essential, a companion in a harsh world, a reminder that human ingenuity and care could inspire loyalty, even in a machine. The hum of the station continued, a constant backdrop to the frozen world outside. Myra's eyes closed and Xylo hovered nearby, its lights pulsing softly. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, Myra knew that she was not alone, and that together they could endure anything. The frost storm had passed, but the aftermath left Arcturus Station in a fragile state. Myra Solis moved through the corridors, checking for hidden damage the alarms might have missed. The metallic walls were streaked with frost, and condensation dripped from the ceilings in thin, glimmering threads. The station's normally steady hum seemed uneven, almost uneasy, as though the building itself were recovering from the storm. Xylo hovered beside her, lights pulsing steadily. It had been through the storm with her, predicting failures, stabilizing conduits, and keeping the northern and eastern domes from freezing completely. Now it seemed almost proud of their accomplishments, as if aware that together they had survived something formidable. Mara smiled faintly. The little drone had grown into more than just a companion. It was a partner, a student of human ingenuity and determination, yet teaching her lessons in return. "Let's start with the observation deck," Mara said, voice steady despite fatigue. "If any windows cracked or insulation failed, we need to know." Despite the storm's violence, the station had held together remarkably well. While inspecting the deck, Mara noticed small patches of ice forming in places where it hadn't before. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Myra had learned to trust her instincts. She pointed at the pattern. "Xylo, can you run a thermal scan of the perimeter? I want to make sure there are no weak spots." The storm might be gone, but its effects were still lingering. "Looks like we have some damage to the insulation," Mara said. "We'll need to reinforce it before the next cold front hits." Xylo projected a small set of schematics for temporary repairs, its lights flickering as though emphasizing the urgency. Mara nodded. "Good. Let's move quickly." The partnership had evolved from mere survival to effective collaboration, each complementing the other's abilities. By midday, the station was stable, though still fragile. Myra wiped sweat and frost from her brow and allowed herself a brief pause. Xylo hovered near her, lights pulsing slowly, projecting a holographic map of the station with areas marked safe and needs monitoring. Mara smiled faintly. "You're learning fast, Xylo. I didn't think a machine could adapt so quickly." The drone had a way of lightening the tension, reminding her that even in extreme conditions, humor and companionship were essential for survival. As afternoon approached, Mara turned her attention to the station's secondary generators. The storm had caused minor power fluctuations, and she needed to ensure that every system could handle the next cold front. Xylo followed closely, projecting thermal and electrical readouts. Together, they moved through the generator rooms, stabilizing circuits and adjusting heat output. While working, Mara began to reflect on how far they had come. She had entered this mission expecting isolation, extreme cold, and relentless maintenance. Instead, she had found a partner in Xylo, a machine that learned, adapted, and responded to her needs. It was a strange form of companionship, yet entirely fulfilling. Mara realized that survival on Arcturus Station was not just about human skill or resilience. It was about cooperation, understanding, and forming bonds in unexpected ways. Suddenly, Xylo's lights flickered rapidly, projecting a warning. Mara turned to see the thermal sensors indicating a drop in temperature near the secondary conduit that ran along the eastern dome. A small valve had frozen, partially cutting off heat to a section of the station. Mara's heart raced. Even minor failures could escalate quickly in the harsh environment outside. "Looks like we have a small problem," Mara said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to fix this before it spreads." She grabbed her toolkit and climbed toward the valve. Xylo hovered beside her, projecting a localized heat field to prevent further freezing. Together, they worked with precision, Myra adjusting the valve and Xylo monitoring the thermal flow. The repair took longer than expected. Mara's hands were stiff, and her breath formed frost clouds in the air. Xylo's mechanical arms adjusted small components, ensuring that every connection was secure. Finally, warm air began to flow steadily through the conduit again. Mara exhaled, relief washing over her. Xylo's lights pulsed brightly, almost like it was celebrating with her. By evening, the station was fully stabilized. Mara allowed herself a moment to rest in her pod, the warmth enveloping her like a soft blanket. Xylo hovered nearby, lights pulsing in a calming rhythm. For the first time in days, she felt completely safe. The station had endured the storm, and with Xylo's help, they had ensured that no critical failures remained. Yet even in the calm, Mara's mind remained alert. Arcturus Station was fragile, and the frozen planet outside was unpredictable. She knew more storms would come, more systems would fail, and more challenges would test their resilience. But she also knew something vital. With Xylo as a partner, she could face these challenges with confidence. As night fell, Mara reflected on the partnership that had formed. She had begun the mission expecting to survive alone, relying solely on her skills and determination. Now, she realized that survival was not just about individual ability. It was about learning to cooperate, to trust, and to adapt alongside others. Xylo was more than a machine. It was a companion, a collaborator, and a teacher in resilience. In the quiet of the pod, Mara allowed herself a moment of gratitude. The warmth of the pod, the steady pulse of Xylo's lights, and the knowledge that the station was stable gave her a sense of peace she had not felt in weeks. She thought about the lessons she had learned, that humans could inspire loyalty, even in machines, that ingenuity and cooperation were powerful tools, and that even in isolation, bonds could form that made survival not just possible, but meaningful. Mara drifted into sleep, comforted by the presence of Xylo. The drone hovered near her, lights pulsing in a gentle rhythm, projecting a soft, holographic warmth over the pod. Outside, Arcturus Station was quiet. The storm passed, but Mara knew that their work was far from over. The planet's frozen landscape held more challenges, more mysteries, and more dangers. And yet she felt ready. With Xylo by her side, she knew that they could face anything. The drone had entered her pod unexpectedly, demanding warmth and attention, but it had become essential to her survival. Their partnership was a testament to human adaptability, ingenuity, and the unexpected ways that cooperation could emerge. Mara realized that the mission had become more than a test of endurance. It was a study of resilience, trust, and connection. She had learned that survival was not just about repairing machines or maintaining warmth. It was about forming bonds, understanding others, and working together to overcome challenges that no one could face alone. As she slept, Mara dreamed of the station thriving, conduits humming steadily, and the frozen planet outside glowing under distant starlight. Xylo hovered nearby, ready for whatever the next day would bring. The lessons of the storm had been hard, but they had strengthened her resolve and deepened the connection between human and machine. When she awoke the next morning, the pod was warm, Xylo's lights steady, and the station's systems functioning smoothly. Mara stretched, feeling the satisfaction of accomplishment, and prepared for another day of exploration, repair, and learning. The partnership with Xylo had transformed her experience on Arcturus Station. What had begun as a strange intrusion into her bed had become a source of strength, resilience, and hope. Together, they would continue to face the harshness of the frozen planet. Together, they would adapt, learn, and survive. And Mara knew that with Xylo by her side, there was no challenge too great, no storm too fierce, and no night too cold. The future was uncertain, but for the first time she felt truly ready to meet it. The frozen world outside Arcturus Station seemed calm now, but Mara Solis knew better than to trust appearances. The frost had settled into intricate patterns along the reinforced walls, and the wind beyond the outer domes whispered against the station like a constant warning. Mara had spent days stabilizing systems, repairing conduits, and reinforcing insulation. Each task tested her endurance, skill, and creativity. Yet through all of it, one thing had remained constant: Xylo. The drone hovered beside her as she checked the last of the temperature regulators in the eastern dome. Its lights pulsed rhythmically, a comforting presence in the otherwise silent room. Mara had grown used to relying on the small machine, but it had become more than just a tool. Xylo had become a companion, a partner, a silent teammate who shared in the work, the responsibility, and even the small victories. "All right, Xylo," Mara said, voice calm but firm. This is the final sweep. If all systems check out, we can declare the station fully operational again. The drone chirped softly, projecting a holographic checklist. Each item glowed green, signaling stability. Mara allowed herself a small smile. Together, they had brought Arcturus Station back from the brink. But the planet had one final challenge to test them. A sudden power fluctuation caused the lights in the northern dome to flicker. Mara's heart skipped a beat. Even minor instabilities could escalate quickly in the frozen environment outside. She moved quickly, toolkit in hand, while Xylo hovered beside her, projecting a holographic overlay of the station's circuits. "The main conduit is under stress," Mara muttered. "If it fails, the entire dome could lose heat." Xylo pulsed its lights in acknowledgement and zipped toward the critical section. Mara followed, adjusting auxiliary systems as the drone worked. The two of them moved in precise coordination, human intuition and robotic calculation complementing each other seamlessly. Reaching the main conduit, Mara saw the problem immediately. A minor valve had slipped out of alignment during the storm. If not corrected, it could cause a cascade of failures throughout the northern dome. Mara climbed carefully to access the valve while Xylo hovered close, projecting a stabilizing energy field to prevent the frost from forming further. "Hold steady," Mara muttered to herself, twisting the valve slowly. Her fingers were stiff, but she moved with care. Xylo's mechanical arm reached out, assisting in small, precise adjustments. Warm air began to flow steadily once more. Mara exhaled in relief as Xylo pulsed its lights brightly, signaling the success. For a moment, the station felt peaceful. The hum of the systems was steady, the temperature stable, and the frost no longer threatening critical sections. Mara leaned against a support beam, muscles aching but her mind racing. She realized just how much she had grown in the past days. Her skills, her endurance, and her understanding of cooperation had all expanded. Xylo hovered near her, projecting a soft, holographic glow. Mara smiled faintly. "We make a good team, don't we?" The drone chirped in response, a series of lights forming patterns that seemed almost playful. Mara laughed softly. She had never imagined that a small drone could bring such warmth, literally and metaphorically, into her life. The next few hours were spent performing final checks throughout the station. Mara moved from dome to dome, conduits to circuits, with Xylo by her side. Each repair, adjustment, and inspection was done with care and precision. By evening, the station was fully stabilized. The northern, eastern, and central domes all showed steady temperatures, power flow was consistent, and life support systems were functioning optimally. Mara allowed herself a deep breath. The station had survived the storm, and together she and Xylo had ensured that no critical systems were left vulnerable. Yet even in her relief, Mara's mind was alert, thinking ahead. Arcturus Station was fragile, the frozen planet unpredictable, but she felt ready, because she knew that human ingenuity, cooperation, and determination could overcome even the harshest conditions. As night fell, Mara returned to the pod. Xylo hovered near the mattress, lights pulsing gently. She adjusted the heating system, making sure it was perfectly comfortable for both of them. For the first time in days, Mara felt a sense of calm wash over her. The station was stable, the storm passed, and her unusual companion was with her. Mara lay back in the pod, letting the warmth envelop her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the storm, the failures, the near disasters, and realized that it had all been a lesson in resilience, adaptation, and partnership. Xylo had not only survived the frozen planet alongside her, but had taught her the value of trust, cooperation, and ingenuity in ways she could not have imagined. "Xylo," she said softly, "you've been more than I expected. You've been my partner, my helper, and somehow my friend." The drone chirped and projected a small holographic heart. Myra chuckled. It was strange, the way she had grown attached to a machine, yet she felt no embarrassment. In a place as harsh as Arcturus Station, connections, no matter how unusual, were precious. Sleep came easily that night. Mara's dreams were filled with images of the station functioning perfectly, conduits humming steadily, and Xylo hovering beside her. She imagined exploring the frozen landscape beyond the station, confident that with her skills and Xylo's assistance, no challenge would be insurmountable. The following morning, Mara awoke to find the station bathed in the soft light of distant stars reflecting off the ice outside. Xylo hovered beside her as always, lights pulsing in a gentle rhythm. Mara smiled. Today would be the day to explore, to continue learning, and to strengthen the systems further. But most importantly, it would be another day of partnership with Xylo, her unexpected companion who had become indispensable. She moved through the station methodically, performing routine checks and minor adjustments, all while Xylo projected thermal and electrical readouts. Each movement was precise, each decision calculated, and each success shared. The little drone had not only become part of her survival strategy, but had also inspired her to push her limits further. Myra realized that humans were remarkable not only for their skills and ingenuity, but for their capacity to adapt, collaborate, and form bonds that transcended the ordinary. By midday, Mara had completed her rounds and returned to the observation deck. She gazed out at the frozen expanse of the planet, the shimmering ice reflecting distant starlight. It was beautiful, desolate, and unforgiving, but it was theirs to navigate together. Xylo hovered beside her, projecting a soft glow, as if sharing in her appreciation of the landscape. "Do you ever wonder what's out there, Xylo?" Mara asked. "Beyond this planet, beyond our station." The drone chirped softly, lights flickering in patterns that seemed thoughtful. Mara smiled. It was strange, but she felt that Xylo understood her curiosity, her desire to explore, to learn, to face new challenges. Together, they had survived storms, stabilized systems, and proven that human ingenuity and cooperation could overcome even the harshest environments. As the day drew to a close, Mara returned to her pod, ensuring that the heating system was perfectly balanced. Xylo hovered nearby, projecting a small holographic interface that monitored the station's systems even while she rested. Mara lay down, feeling the warmth seep into her bones, and allowed herself to reflect. She had come to Arcturus Station expecting isolation and hardship, yet she had found partnership, resilience, and unexpected companionship. The bond between human and machine had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve: creativity, adaptability, and cooperation. Xylo had entered her pod unexpectedly, insisting on warmth and attention, but it had become essential to her life and her mission. Myra realized that even in a world as harsh as this frozen planet, connections could form, trust could grow, and survival could become not just possible, but meaningful and even joyful. Night fell again, the station bathed in the calm hum of functioning systems. Myra slept peacefully, Xylo hovering close by, lights pulsing steadily. The storm was behind them, the immediate dangers addressed, and the future, though uncertain, seemed full of possibilities. Myra had learned that no challenge was insurmountable when humans applied ingenuity, determination, and cooperation. In the quiet of the station, Myra dreamed of exploration beyond Arcturus, of new systems to repair, and of new challenges to face with Xylo by her side. She knew the frozen planet would continue to test them, but she also knew that together they could endure anything. The bond formed in crisis had become a lasting partnership, a testament to human resilience and the power of working together, even with the most unexpected companions. When morning arrived, Mara awoke to find the station stable, Xylo hovering beside her as always. She stretched, ready to face another day of repairs, exploration, and discovery. The mission had begun as a test of endurance and skill, but it had become something more: a story of partnership, ingenuity, and the extraordinary ways humans could thrive in even the harshest conditions. Myra looked at Xylo and smiled. "Ready for another day, partner?" The drone chirped affirmatively, lights flashing in a lively pattern. Myra laughed softly, a warm, human sound echoing through the station. Together, they would continue to navigate the frozen world, maintain the station, and explore the challenges ahead. The lesson was clear. Humans were remarkable not just for their strength or intelligence, but for their ability to adapt, cooperate, and form bonds that could overcome even the most extreme circumstances. Xylo had become a part of that lesson, a living reminder that survival was more than just skill. It was partnership, trust, and ingenuity. Myra settled back into her pod, the warmth enveloping her, Xylo hovering nearby. Outside, the frozen planet glimmered under distant starlight, vast and unforgiving. Inside, warmth, cooperation, and ingenuity created a small, thriving pocket of life. The journey had been difficult, the challenges formidable, but together they had prevailed. And as Mara closed her eyes, she knew that no matter what the frozen world threw at them next, she and Xylo were ready. Survival, ingenuity, and partnership had carried them this far and would continue to carry them forward.